Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to what will be the first of many Vizzers Studio. Before we get started and get to introductions, I want to do a quick explanation on what we hope Vizzers will be. So anyone who is active in the Tableau data fan community knows how much amazing content there is out there already, from community projects like Makeover Monday, Workout Wednesday, to blogs and podcasts. With the Vizzer Studio, we kind of hope to straddle the lines of all those great initiatives. So we'll be bringing in some familiar faces, maybe some not so familiar faces. We're going to chat a bit about some of their recent projects, how they're doing, some of their favorite features from that Viz. So each episode is kind of part video tutorial, part behind the scenes. You can think of it as a data Viz director's cut. So with that, I'm going to bring in my host for today's episode, my co-host, Daria. How are you today?
Thank you, Tim. I'm doing great. How are you?
Awesome. I'm good. About to go on a little vacation, so I'm excited. We're doing this on a Sunday, so I'm ready for my little break.
Awesome.
So, our first guest for today's episode is Stephen Shoemaker. Stephen, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Tim. Thanks for asking.
Awesome. So we're here to talk about your Viz, Ingredient of Happiness. But first, we want to know a little bit about you, a little bit about your background and kind of your experience, your data Viz journey.
Sure. My name is Stephen Shoemaker. I've been involved in the analytics field for about 7 years. I got my start as a military intelligence analyst, primarily focused on geospatial analysis. So I use programs like ArcGIS or QGIS, if you're familiar with those, to look at satellite imagery of planes, tanks, automobiles. From there, I would then identify what those things are, build out presentation for captain or admiral level military officials, and essentially explain the data to them. In the civil, got my start in analytics with a company which I currently work for. Been with them around WeWork. My work is to do the analytics for our learning and development department. So what I'm looking to do is track trends of how our learners are engaging with our material to see what kind of levers we can push and pull to improve the learning experience for our employees at our company, and building out Tableau visualizations and dashboards so that executive and C-suite can understand the data that's happening behind the scenes.
You're based in Dallas-Fort Worth area, right?
That is right. I'm Dallas.
Awesome. Yeah,
Based in Dallas.
Yes, yeah. I am as well, of course. And Daria, I know you're not from the area, but Stephen, we gotta make plans to get together soon when all this is over.
Absolutely.
All right, so we're here to jump into one of your Vizes, Ingredients of Happiness. We have a few questions lined up for you before we kind of dig into it. To set those up.
Sure. So I think that before we jump into the specific Viz, I would like to ask and hear about your process in general. So how do you plan? Do you have any whiteboarding or sketching?
Gotcha. Thank you, Daria. Let's see. My process. I think my process is fairly standard. I would say I'm a design-oriented person, so for me, I always have to follow a process for every single visualization that I'm going through. And when I am looking at to create a new viz, it kind of works like this. I have to understand what the general building blocks of my visualization will be before I even get started. So I usually begin my vizzes by wireframing it out in Adobe XD, which is by nature a UI UX program, but it works really well, I think, with Tableau because you can actually import and export between the two fairly easy. What I'm doing in Adobe XD is I'm trying to get a sense of where things should be. So where do I want this graph? Where do I want this text? Where do I want everything to be in its place? And this is a basic kind of outline, but it helps me to start putting together what kind of things will actually be in the vids. And once I've hammered out that basic outline, what I do next is I go into Tableau and I start that EDA, so the exploratory data analysis. I'm start generating ideas, and I'm not much of a fancy visualizer, I would say. So I'm always thinking like bar charts, line charts, big numbers, things like that. And that helps me kind of understand the shape of the data, understand the story behind the data. And once I've had that formalization of the story, I have the formalization of the general outline. From there, I'll start building and exporting it between Adobe XD and Tableau until it really starts to look what I'm to what I see in my head. And from there, I just go back in the Tableau and add on functionality. So the little fun little things you'll see.
Awesome.
So,
So the dish we're looking at today is the ingredients of happiness. So Stephen, could you please tell us a little bit more about this dish? So essentially, was there any particular story you were looking for, or where did you source the data?
Good question, Daria. I don't really begin with a story in mind with a lot of the visualizations. I try and let the data tell the story. So with this one, where I was able to get the data was, it was actually part of our Makeover Monday challenge that goes on Twitter, if you've ever heard of that, or if anyone has heard of that. It's essentially a weekly, I wouldn't say it's a competition, but it's a weekly community initiative, specifically on Twitter, where we're given an example data set, and we're tasked with reimagining it or putting it in a way that people could better understand, or just generally doing something else with it. So you see a lot of creative and unique ideas come out of there. For this week in particular, we were looking at the 2020 World Happiness Report, which is pulled out by Gallup. The data was broken into two parts, and I found it a little bit complex. There's two things that we were looking at. One is a happiness score. So we had a list of countries, and each one was a subjective score of out of 10, where individuals gave their assessment of how they feel and what their well-being is in that country. The second part of the data was the Gallup researchers actually looked at those scores and attempted to explain them and what led into that. So if you say have a happiness score of 7, the Gallup researcher was saying, well, what percentage of that comes from their freedom to make life choices? What percentage of that comes from their level of generosity in the country? And so on and so forth. That data in and of itself was a little bit complex. If anything, the story I was trying to tell with this data set was simply how happy people were and where did that happiness come from. And so that was what I was using as my leading indicator and my leading kind of vision as I began this visualization.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm always these world rankings. This one in particular, some of the other ones I've seen are always interesting. They tend to shake up your preconceived notions of certain countries and what you think is happening out there, and provide the context of maybe what the residents actually think, the population of that country. They're always interesting to me.
Yeah, I love those these kind of assessments because, speaking as an American, we always have the idea in our head that we're the happiest and best country in the world, and then you see these rankings and this information, and you have that checked. So that's one of the beauty of just having data in general.
Absolutely. One of the things that caught my eye about this viz was the collapsible container you're doing here with the choose country. So of course it's going to refresh on me. Just a second here. So hitting this button provides a bar chart, which the user can select from and view that particular country.
That's right.
I thought that was a really cool feature, really cool way to leverage that. So if you don't mind, we'd like to do some reverse engineering today to kind of recreate that.
Yeah, let's do it. I'd love to.
Absolutely. All right. So let me hop over to my version of Tableau Public here. All I've done so far is, I'm leveraging Superstore, first of all, not the actual data source in question. All I've done so far is create that list of countries. So what's the first step in creating those buttons and creating that action you have in that worksheet?
Cool. Yeah. So the first step, what you're going to begin with is you're going to actually need to create a parameter. Okay, so the parameter is going to be the main driver that we'll be using for this button technique, and so it's important. So what we're going to do is let's create this parameter. We'll call it full or collapsed, so FULL or collapsed. And let's set the data type as a string.
Okay.
Okay, and let's allowable values to put that as a list. Perfect. And let's just put full or collapsed. Perfect. So step one, easy. Let's move on to the second step, which is what we'll do is we'll create a calculated field. So go ahead and create the calculated field. Let's just call this full list. So the full list of all the states in this case. And then what we're going to do is use an if calculation. So let's do if full or collapsed, so our parameter, equals full. Then it should be collapsed. Otherwise, so full Great. So we'll
Something
end
like
that.
that.
Yep, that's it.
Perfect.
Okay, so now we have a parameter and we have our calculated field. So the next step is we actually need to create those buttons. So what you'll do is create a sheet,
Okay.
okay? And what I want you to do is actually drag that calculated field that we created
Mhm.
onto the marks card. We'll need to set that as a shape prior to that.
That's right. Yep. I'm gonna drag this
Okay,
right under the shape.
right. So what you should have is you'll have two states, the collapse or full. Go ahead and show that parameter for me, Tim.
Yeah. Let's see here. There we go.
Okay, so when you change that parameter, it's going to give us two different shapes, collapse, full, perfect. So what we're going to actually do now is create that button. Tim, if I recall, you do have some button shapes you've already
Yeah,
made.
yeah, I'm gonna go pull up those shapes now. So for, what are we looking at in this case? We're looking at the collapsed at the moment.
Okay,
So I think
so
we want that. Mhm.
so if you're looking at the collapse, what you're going to want to have it is actually the choose a country or choose a state button.
And then
Okay.
when we switch back to collapsed, right, we want
Yes.
collapse list, right?
Perfect. Great. So what we have now is we have our button, we have our calculated field, and we have our parameter. So the next step is actually to go back to your list of states and
Mhm.
take that calculated field that we created,
Yep.
drag that onto the filters, hit all values, and make sure that that is full. So click that, hit OK. Okay. So we have all the basic building blocks for our Viz now. Let's go ahead and create a dashboard.
Okay. And for the sake of the demo, I'm just gonna set this to automatic, just so it fills up the whole screen.
Okay.
And maybe just try to recreate the layout of your Viz. You had it side by side, right? One
Yeah.
second. So something like that. And I'm going to pull in my list of states.
All right.
All right. Now what's next here?
So you're going to pull in your button now here. Okay. You can just move that to the side. So go ahead and click on that button. Might want to make it a little larger
So
there.
small. Yeah. Try to make that a little bit bigger. Maybe go back to that sheet here. One second. That helps a little bit.
Okay. I think
Okay.
that's fine for now. Click on the button. Just
Mhm.
check here. Okay. So nothing's happening. So our final step is we actually need to set up a parameter action.
Mhm.
So let's go ahead and start that. So we'll go to the actions dashboard, add action, and we will do a changed parameter. Okay. And from there, what we're actually going to do is have it when you select a button, and let's bring the source as the actual button sheet. Targeting the, yeah, the
Oh,
target, the
yeah. You
button
want
sheet.
the.
Mhm. Okay. And then the field should be, yep, you got it right there. Hit OK. Now let's test the functionality here. Perfect.
So when we select choose a state, that oh, there it is. That list
Yeah.
pops up, and
Yeah.
of course the adverse happens or inverse happens rather when we hit collapse, right?
Correct. So basically what's happening is that button is now passing that parameter value back to the sheet, which then is used to hide or show that sheet. This technique can be used for a lot of different things. For me, when I was looking at this Viz, I wanted to include a little surprise. And I felt like when I'm thinking about the real estate that I had with the Viz and the real estate on the screen, having that collapsible container, I think adds a little bit of more dynamic functionality to the Viz overall and allows it to keep that in a compact and minimalistic view.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that technique because I think we've talked about this before. Like you mentioned, it allows you to hide something or add additional context, kind of at the user's request, right? They click on something, interact, and they're given an additional view or some additional context. So I like that feature a lot. I like how you leverage that.
Thanks, Tim.
Daria, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I think that this feature is really super useful in terms of like applying to your day-to-day work, because personally I find that sometimes using some like technical features. For example, like this one, collapsing some supplementary information and allowing a user to just like to click on a button and see the additional information. It's quite useful because sometimes we overload our reports and trying to stuff it with as much information as we can, and knowing how to optimize based on a dashboard sometimes it is crucially important, because that is how we can focus on users' attention on really important information. Yeah, so I think it's
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. That makes a lot of sense. So that pretty much wraps up our session today. I want to thank Stephen, thank Daria for joining us. Stephen, before we sign off, any last thoughts or any shout outs you want to mention?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you guys for having me on. It's always fun to be able to explain some of the Tableau tricks that you've learned in your career, and I'm very excited by this series because I know that we have a huge amount of experts out there in the Tableau community. I'm still new to the community, so I know there's so much for me to learn. So I look forward to seeing more tips and techniques for Tableau.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. And Daria, thank you for helping me host today.
thank you
And
so much.
thank you for joining us out there, and we hope to see you next time.